Hey everyone, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Sorry it's been a little while since I've done a video. Basically lots of life admin. I'm obviously back at home, as you can see, although I did mention that last time I was recording anything. The lockdown wave 3 is now in effect, so generally everyone's working from home. So I've got the good record backdrop again, which is quite nice. Now, another reason I haven't really done it much in the last couple of weeks is there aren't that many stories in terms of tech and law. So I'm actually not going to talk about law very much at all, maybe a teensy-weensy bit. Instead, I'm going to talk something that's a little bit more geopolitical and a little bit more, I guess, the state of technology and the sort of changes I think we're going to be facing as things emerge, both from COVID-19 and the way the world's going in general. So I've called this video, as pure clickbait more than anything else, Tech War. Now that isn't the war between the Autobots and the Decepticons, so it's not one shall stand, one shall fall. I think it is you who will fall, Optimus Prime. Hopefully you got that reference. Neither is it the series of books by William Shatner, which your nerd credentials will match mine if you have read any of those. If you haven't read any of them, by all means don't check them out. He writes very much like he acts, which is in very brief sentences interrupted by something else, which is annoying. He does that a lot. Anyway, we've seen some interesting things happen in the tech world, which is why I use the phrase tech war, because I think things are starting to kick off a bit. This isn't war where everyone's fighting each other with swords, guns, missiles and bullets. No, not at all. This is actually a war where different countries are drawing their data sovereignty and protection of data. What's the word I'm looking for? Battle lines would go quite well with this, in an attempt to basically protect their citizens' data and also protect a bit of their economic interests. Now, this has been brewing for a long time. I've talked about this before, certainly about data sovereignty. But a few things have happened in the last month or two. One thing that happened here in Hong Kong is we got a national security law. We're all waiting to see what impact that has on the internet and tech businesses as we know it. There is concern with a lot of technology companies that because the law essentially allows the police to search and seize equipment, which would include basically data generating, data storing equipment, being them servers, computers, maybe data centers. That would be quite scary, but it's entirely possible. There's concern that a lot of tech companies will pull out, and there's been lots of reports in lots of different types of press that this may happen, though it hasn't completely happened yet, but I think it might be on the horizon. Then other things have happened that are quite interesting. One big one is Twitter's hack, which looks as if it was a social engineering hack of various celebrities, where you had people like Bill Gates basically posting, I will now give you a load of money if you put, I don't know, 10 bitcoins, no, that'd be a load of money. If you put $10 worth of Bitcoin into this account, I will give you back whatever it is 10 times. I don't know if anyone fell for it. If you are one of the people who fell for it, then by all means, send me 10 biscuits and I will give you back 15 packets of biscuits. And I won't really, I'll just eat the biscuits myself. But people were worried at the scale of it and the fact that it was very high profile celebrities that were hacked, and Twitter have dealt with it accordingly. So that happened. Another thing happened was that China, who will feature a fair bit in this video in terms of falling out with people, fell out with India in a big way, and that led to India trying to ban, well, they did ban a lot of Chinese technology. Now, not just in terms of hardware, in fact more in terms of software, which brings me on to one thing I want to talk about, which is TikTok. Now, as I record this, Donald Trump, President of the United States, at least until November, who knows what will happen then, is threatening to ban TikTok in the United States. Now, if you've never used TikTok before, if you've never seen it, then it's basically an app where you can record videos on a platform, and it's taken off in a big way. It's become easily as successful as some of the big tech giants in the US, and it's actually owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese-owned company. As with Zoom, all the concerns come out, well, if it's owned by a Chinese company, is there a risk that it's basically collecting data and sending it to China, particularly in America, where in America the rule is, as the Spice Girls would say, if you want to steal my data, you better be a US-based corporation. Because let's face it, most places are taking your data if they're giving you something for free. So before I go on to TikTok, just remember this rule. Key rule. Any internet platform you use that gives you something for free is almost certainly going to be taking something from you in terms of data, most likely data. Now, it might not be anything sinister, it may be just anonymous use statistics, but it may be things like some of your personal data, some of your purchasing preferences for advertisers. In the case of some companies, it could be your DNA data, for example, if you are sending off to get some sort of family tree record or find out what your heritage was. People need to realise this. I know I talk about this all the time, and people are like, God, Haswell, why are you always ranting about this? But nothing is for free. My mum always used to give advice, there's no such thing as a free lunch, which is absolutely true. Although I think she was talking to once when she went to some sort of timeshare meeting, got stuck for 8 hours talking about some awful place in Spain, only to have a really bad sandwich lunch and decided she didn't want to do it, which was a good idea, I suppose. Anyway, you must assume if you are essentially using a service that where you provide data, it gives you something in return, Facebook, Google, whatever, then in some way they are using your data. Just assume that. You don't know how, you can probably find out how in most cases, but just assume they are. But the concern now is, because the world, let's face it, is a little bit of a scary place. US has fallen out massively with China. There's almost a new Cold War brewing. China has fallen out with lots of places and become increasingly aggressive in tone. In fact, their school of diplomacy seems to come from the Bond villain handbook of how to manage difficult situations, which really isn't helping things. But that's made people very much more nervous. So when you've got a Chinese tech company such as TikTok, or such as ByteDance really, with TikTok becoming popular in the US, there's a concern that it's actually doing something to take user data. Now, let's go back, and I've mentioned these before, all those apps that let you change your face, right? People are like, oh, these are so funny. I can look like an anime character. I can look like I'm old. I can look like a cat. Whatever else you're into, I suppose you probably look like. And they thought, oh, these are great. But then not realizing when they read the terms and conditions that their face data was being taken, and that was being used, essentially used for research, being sold, and it was owned by the companies who the app belonged to. TikTok, similarly, there's a concern, even though their terms and conditions, having read through them, are reasonably vague on what they're doing, perhaps deliberately so, but that's fair enough. There's a worry that they're collecting US citizens and everyone's citizens' personal data. They are almost certainly collecting data in terms of what's in the videos, because there's been cases where videos have essentially been censored, which again raises people's heckles a bit, and not censored for essentially what would be violent or abusive or horrible content, but criticising the Chinese government. Fair enough, Chinese company, you're probably required to comply with whatever the Chinese government tells you to do, and that means taking down content critical of the Chinese government, then so be it. But there's a concern that all this data is now going to China, and so the US wants to protect its citizens' data, as does anyone really want to protect their own citizens' data, and it's creating these battle lines. Now, people have been saying, I mean, one of the questions I asked, here's some law, is a country essentially allowed to ban a certain type of technology within its country? Can you ban TikTok in the US? And of course you can, because think of what's banned in China without really any repercussions. The World Trade Organization is not saying you need to allow Facebook, you need to allow Google, you need to allow all these websites. Of course not. You can do what you want. And this is where I think the battle lines are being drawn, and we're getting into a position where essentially the whole sort of way that the internet would previously work, and let's face it, big tech has worked incredibly well on the fact that you have these apps that are used almost worldwide, excluding, it seems, China and perhaps Russia in some cases, and you can use them anywhere, and they're just so useful. They become parts of our everyday life. Similarly, that in China, WeChat is everywhere. You cannot actually survive very easily on a day-to-day basis if you are not using WeChat. WeChat, it seems, is then taking information that you use on its platform and then using it, browsing it, using it, storing it, possibly giving it to the Chinese government or the police if they want to. So we'll see. So we've seen that. Another big thing we've seen in terms of the battle lines, in terms of tech war, is US basically data companies. This is Facebook, this is Google, there are others, I think maybe Twitter, but I'm not sure. When the national security law came in Hong Kong, they said they would no longer comply with police requests for information. And they had previously. You can get a court order and you have to comply with it, but now they're saying they won't. And then there's a concern that because of that, they may face penalties in Hong Kong, and it won't be that they decide to move out of Hong Kong, they'll be forced out of Hong Kong. So you've got another battle line. So what we're essentially seeing now is that this whole fracturing of the technology markets, where we will find different countries have access to different apps. We will probably find maybe unofficial versions of the Great Firewall cropping up around the world in terms of what you can use where and who's willing to allow what. And I just don't know if this is necessarily a good thing. Now, a while ago, I'd say this is absolutely a bad thing. But then if you were watching some of the discussions with some of the tech giants, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, who else did we have? We had obviously Zuckerberg, and then there's one other, and I can't remember who exactly it was, basically being interviewed on what they thought about interference by China with data systems, about IP, about the power that these tech giants hold. And you got the feeling that some of them weren't really prepared. I thought Tim Cook came off probably the best of them. But even he, who, let's face it, he must have a pretty impressive PR department, much better than, say, me with Optimus Prime that I had earlier. Even he didn't seem to be able to answer the questions. So we're finding the power that these tech companies own. And so I would put in that Amazon, certainly Google, certainly Apple, certainly Facebook. I would also roll into that Tencent for sure, and Alibaba for sure. The power they hold is bigger than anything else. We've also seen during the whole COVID-19 crisis, disaster, whatever you want to call it, which is starting to look less like a mini-series and more like a very long, drawn-out epic, that most companies have suffered financial losses and most people are struggling, except for the tech giants. I mean, Amazon stands out in particular. Their revenue has been going up and up and up. Most of this is because we're now almost entirely reliant on tech. We can't really go outdoors very easily. Let's just describe it as an ordeal. I had to do something that was all paper form based, involving sending things to the UK recently, and the inconvenience of it, which maybe 10 years ago I'd have been like, this isn't too bad, was just overwhelming for me. Not only had to do that, I had to go to the post office and courier it. Compared to doing something online, it was insane. But we've got this perfect storm now. Massively powerful tech companies, massively worried governments about the influence that overseas companies are having on their citizens and on their, I suppose, on their elections. Let's be honest. Let's see what happens with the US election, shall we? But on their elections, on the way that their way of life is running. You've got a general now, I mentioned this sort of new Cold War brewing. And I feel like technology, in some ways, apart from everyone else in the world, will be one of the victims. I think we're facing a very, very rocky road for tech companies. And we are facing what is called a tech war, called by me, not called by anyone else, called by me, William Shatner, perhaps. So what's this going to look like? This will be banning, as I mentioned earlier, some of the tech companies being able to operate in certain countries. But then we'll also see the tool of sanctions being used, where not just hardware is prevented from import-export, which is the traditional way of sanctioning someone, it seems, from the US at least. We might also find sanctions for businesses that are using certain technology. This is purely hypothetical, but suppose that the US imposed sanctions on any company that was using Zoom for its teleconference facilities. Suppose China imposed sanctions on any company that's using US technology. I was asked recently, and it's a question I don't have the answer to. I'm sort of slowly but surely getting there, and I'd be interested in your view. Under the national security law, if you do anything that undermines China or Hong Kong interests, then essentially wherever you are in the world, you're breaching the law and you can face penalties. Now, if you comply with a US sanction, for example, you're a bank, and then you say, I don't know, you close down a load of Chinese accounts as a result of compliance with that sanction, are you in breach of the national security law? Question number two, then what do you choose? Do you choose, I'll comply with the US sanctions, and then I might find that some of my people get arrested or I'm in trouble? Or do I comply with the national security law and then find the sanctions bite and maybe I can't trade in US dollar? This is all coming down to elements of technology, and it's creating this very, very odd environment. So as I said earlier, I think we're on the cusp of something that will change the technology world and the access to free internet and basically easy to use services unlike anything before. And I worry, because I got into basically technology with the way of liberating us from basically geographical boundaries, maybe because I grew up in a tiny village in the middle of nowhere and I was very, very bored and had only a Commodore 64 to entertain myself, and it didn't connect to the internet in those days, I can tell you. There wasn't any internet, that's probably why. Not really, not where we were. But you can see that we're taking essentially a step back and finding ourselves in this world where suddenly the world is not as open as it used to be, and everyone seems a bit more hostile, and the technology issues are what's leading the way. But anyway, I'm interested in your views on this. Like I said, not really much law in there. I did mention sanctions, I suppose. Let me know, get in touch, comments below. Is it below? Yeah, comments below if you have them. And if you've got any things you'd like me to talk about next time, do let me know. Like I said, there's not much law unless you want a lecture on data protection law, which I suppose you could try and figure out what the titles are on the records behind me to pass the time while I'm doing it, but it might not be the most interesting thing in the world. Anyway, stay safe everyone. Wear masks. Good God. What is with the people not wanting to wear masks when there's a thing that can kill you going around? I don't know. So please do wear a mask if you're going out. But I'll be back very, very soon. Take care.
Hi, future Paul here. Future in the sense that this has been recorded after I'd finished recording the video and after I'd almost finished editing it, because in the time it's taken for me to record what was in that last video and right now when I'm about to upload it, there's been a few changes, the main one being around TikTok, and that's what I want to talk about. Now, I talked about how Donald Trump was looking to ban TikTok in the US. He wasn't happy about it. There's also the fact, well, Microsoft are looking to buy TikTok, ideal platform for them in terms of the social media game, where they've not really done very well and they'd love to get into it. Well, now that's kind of changed, because it seems like Donald Trump is actually in favor of a US company buying TikTok, be it Microsoft or someone else. So we'll see what happens. Now, that does actually underline what I was talking about, in that if you have a technology platform that is collecting, using, monitoring, storing, doing whatever with data, it seems that the country whose data is being collected would rather that the platform was owned by someone in that country as well. And I think we're seeing that's more and more the case. In the case in China forever, let's be honest, we've all know that. I think it will continue around the world. We'll find Western platforms for Western data, other platforms for other data, and the internet won't be quite as what's the word I'm looking for, won't be quite as all-encompassing it was, but at least maybe people will feel a bit safer. I don't know about that. I probably wouldn't, but yeah, we'll see. This whole tech war thing that stupid phrase that I came up with or stole from William Shatner continues, and I'm interested in what you think about the whole thing. By all means, get in touch, leave some comments, and hopefully I will see you guys all very soon. Please don't comment about how messy this room is. I know this is Hong Kong apartments to the max. You cannot see what's out of frame. Let's just say at any moment it could all fall on top of me. All right, take care. See you soon.